Book of Heaven, Volume 19, 3rd to the 7th of September 1926. Page 178 to 187. September 3, 1926. The desire purges the soul and whets her appetite for the goods of Jesus. How the divine will is penetrating and converts its effects into one's nature. I was feeling all identified with my sweet Jesus, and I was praying him from the heart to watch over my poor soul, so that nothing might enter into me which was not his will. Now, while I was doing this, my dear good, my sweet life, moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, the desire for a good, for knowing it, purges the soul and disposes her intelligence to comprehend it, her memory to remember it, her will feels its appetite for it being wet, to make of it its food and life, and it moves God to give her that good and to make it known." So, the desire for a good, for knowing it, is like the appetite for food. When there is appetite, one feels the taste, eats with pleasure, remains satisfied and content with having taken that food, and is left with the desire to enjoy it again. On the other hand, if there is no appetite, that same food which is enjoyed so eagerly by someone, causes nausea and disgust to someone else who has no appetite, and he may reach the point of suffering because of it. Such is the desire for the soul. It is like appetite, and in seeing that the desire for my things is her delight, to the point of making of them her food and life, I abound so much in giving, that I never tire of giving. On the other hand, one who does not desire them, because the appetite is missing, will feel nausea for my things, and that gospel saying will be repeated. It will be given to one who has, while one who does not desire my goods, my truths, celestial things, will be deprived of the little he has. Just penalty for one who does not desire, has no appetite for, and wants to know nothing about the things that belong to me. And if he has any little thing at all, it is right that it be taken away from him and be given to those who possess much. Then, after this, I was thinking about and identifying with the holy divine will, and finding myself in its immense light, I felt its divine rays penetrating so deep into me as to transform me into its very light. And Jesus, coming out of my interior, told me, "My daughter, how beautiful, penetrating, communicative, transforming is the light of my will. It is more than sun which, pounding on the earth, gives with liberality the effects that its light contains, nor does it wait to be asked, but, spontaneously, as its light fills the surface of the earth, it gives what it has to everything it encounters. It gives sweetness and taste to the fruit, color and fragrance to the flower, development to the plants. To all things it gives the effects and goods it contains, it makes no exception with anyone, it is enough that its light touches them, penetrates into them and warms them for it to accomplish its work. My will is more than sun, as long as the soul exposes herself to its vivifying rays and banishes the darkness and the night of her human will, its light rises and invests the soul, penetrating into her inmost fibers to dispel from her the shadows and the atoms of the human will. As its light pounds on the soul and she receives it, it communicates all the effects it contains, because, coming out of the Supreme Being, my will contains all the qualities of the divine nature. So, in investing her, it communicates the goodness, the love, the power, the firmness, the mercy and all the divine qualities, not in a superficial way, but in a real way, such as to transmute all of its qualities into the human nature. So much so, that the soul will feel within herself, as her own, the nature of true goodness, of power, of sweetness, of mercy, and so with all the rest of the supreme qualities. My will alone has this power to convert its virtues into one's nature, but only for one who abandons herself prey to its light and to its heat, and keeps the tenebrous night of her own will, away from her, the true and perfect night of the poor creature. September 5, 1926. One who lives in the divine will, possesses a vast paternity and a long daughtership. She is a daughter to all. I was feeling oppressed, or rather, as though lifeless because of the privation of my sweet Jesus. This pain is always new and ever more piercing, in such a way as to form new wounds that make my poor soul bleed with pain. Now, while I was in the nightmare of the pain of his privation, my beloved Jesus moved in my interior, clasping me to his most holy heart, telling me, "My daughter, our daughter, the daughter of the celestial Mama, the daughter of the angels and of the saints, the daughter of the heavens, the daughter of the sun, the daughter of the stars, the daughter of the sea, in sum, you are the daughter of all are fathers to you, and you are a daughter to all. See how vast is the paternity. How long is your daughtership? Instead of oppressing yourself, you should delight, thinking that all are fathers to you and you are a daughter to all. Only one who lives in my will can have the right to such vast paternity and to such a long daughtership, to be loved by all with paternal love, because all recognize in her their daughter. In fact, since created things are all invested with my will, wherever it reigns as triumphant and dominating, they see in you the same will that reigns in them, therefore all hold you as the daughter of their wombs. There are so many bonds between you and them as to surpass in an infinite way the natural bonds that exist between father and son. Do you know who is not your father? Only those who do not let my will reign in them. These have no right over you, nor do you have any duty toward them. They are like something that does not belong to you. But do you know what it means to possess such a vast paternity and such a long daughtership? It means to be bound with bonds of justice to all the riches, the glory, the honor, the privileges that such vast paternity possesses. So, as my daughter, your Jesus gives you all the goods of redemption as gifts. As our daughter, you are endowed with all the goods of the sacrosanct Trinity. As daughter of the sovereign Queen, she gives to you her sorrows, her works, her love and all of her maternal merits as gifts. As daughter of the angels and of the saints, they compete among themselves to give you all of their goods. As daughter of the heavens, of the stars, of the sun, of the sea and of all created things, they feel honored to finally have their daughter, to be able to give their inheritance. And my very will reigning in them, with its endless light forms for you the deed of all creation, and all feel the happiness, the joy of being able to give their inheritance, because by being able to give, they no longer feel sterile, but fecund, and fecundity brings joy, company, harmony, glory, the repetition of one's very life. How many fathers and mothers are unhappy, even though they are rich, because they have no offspring? In fact, sterility in itself brings isolation, bitterness, lack of any support and of happiness, and if it may appear that they enjoy, in their hearts they have the thorn of sterility that embitters all their enjoyments. So, your vast paternity which you possess, and your long daughtership is a cause of joy for all, and much more for my will which, bilocating, reigns in you and constitutes you the daughter of all the things created by it, in such a way that all feel your support and the contentment of being able to give the goods they possess. Therefore, your oppression is not justified in the midst of so many goods, of so much happiness, and of so many who protect you, defend you and love you as their true daughter. After this, I abandoned myself in the arms of Jesus and in the current of the divine will, to do my usual acts, and Jesus, coming back, told me, "My daughter, my will preserves the soul in her origin and does not allow her to go out of her beginning, which is God. It maintains intact the divine image in the depth of her being, which is enclosed in her intellect, memory and will. And as long as the soul lets my will reign in her, everything is linked, everything is in relationship between creator and creature. Even more, she lives in the reflections of the supreme majesty, and our likeness in her grows continuously, and this makes her be distinguished as our daughter. On the other hand, the human will causes her to deny her origin, it makes her decay from her beginning, her intellect, memory and will remain without light, and the divine image remains deformed and unrecognizable. The human will breaks all the divine bonds and relationships, and therefore it makes the soul live in the reflections of all passions, in such a way that she becomes ugly and the daughter of the infernal enemy, who tries to engrave his ugly image in her. How many evils does one's own will not cause? It devastates every good and produces all evils. After this, blessed Jesus brought me outside of myself and showed me how deformed his image had become in creatures. It was horrifying to see it so unrecognizable and ugly. The sanctity of the gaze of Jesus was reluctant to look at them, but the compassion of his most holy heart pushed him to have pity on the works of his hands, deformed into being so ugly because of their fault. But while Jesus was grieved to the summit in seeing his image so transformed, we arrived at some place in which the offenses they were giving him were so many, that unable to take any more, he changed his appearance of goodness, assuming the aspect of justice. He threatened chastisements, and earthquakes, water and fire were put against the peoples, to destroy men and cities. I prayed him to spare the peoples, and Jesus, taking me back into my bed, shared his pains with me. September 7, 1926. How God has his throne, his royal palace, his stable and fixed dwelling. The divine will is sun, the human will is a spark formed by the tip of the rays of the supreme volition. I was about to resume my flight in the supreme volition, to make my usual visit in the kingdom of the divine will, and to extend myself within its boundaries in order to let my I love you, my adoration, my thank you, echo for each created thing. Now, as I was about to do this, I thought to myself, if God is everywhere, why take flight in the divine volition to go up to the height of the heavens, before the supreme majesty, as though carrying all human wills of the generations on my little lap, to do my act of subjection, of love and of abandonment for each rebellious will, in order to conquer the divine will. To come and reign upon earth, dominating and triumphant in the midst of creatures? Since it is everywhere, I can also do it from here. While I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, look at the sun. Its light descends and fills the whole earth, but the sun remains always up there, under the vault of the heavens, with all majesty in its sphere, lording and dominating over everyone and everything with its light. But even though it does not descend down below, it gives the same effects, it communicates the same goods by means of its rays, as if it itself would descend from the height of its sphere. More so because, if the sun descended from its height, since the earth is much smaller and creatures are incapable of sustaining a light so great, in descending it would ignite and eclipse everything with its light and with its heat. But since all things created by me contain the similarity with the bosom of mercy of their Creator, the sun remains up there, emitting its rays full of goodness, of love and of goods for the little earth. Now, if the sun does this, image of the true light of the divine sun, much more so does God, true Sun of light, of justice and of love. My majesty does not move from the height of its throne, but is always firm and stable in its place, in its celestial royal palace. More than sun, it emits its endless rays, which carry its effects, its goods, and communicate its very life, as if it itself would descend to those who want to receive it. So, what it does not do by descending in person, it does through the emanation of its endless rays, bilocating in them, to give its very life and its goods to the human generations. Now, my daughter, because of your condition as creature, and because of your office of the mission of the supreme fiat, it is your duty to go up on those very rays that the supreme majesty emits, to bring yourself before it and fulfill your office in the bosom of the eternal Sun, plunging into the origin from which you came in order to take the fullness of my will as much as is possible for creature, to know it and to manifest it to others. Now, you must know what bonds of identification exist between the divine will and the human will, and therefore why I so much love and want, by right of creation, of paternity, of love and of justice, that the human will would surrender its place to mine, and throwing itself into its arms like a little child, would let itself be held, nourished and dominated by it. In creating man, the Supreme Being placed my will out into the field, although all of our attributes concurred with it as a consequence and naturally. But the supreme volition was the primary act, by which it took to heart the life of all creation, including man, therefore making itself the life of all, dominating everything, making everything its own. Since everything had come out of it, by justice everything was to be its own. More than sun, my will emitted its rays, and with the tips of these rays, animating the human nature, it formed the will in the creature. Do you see, then, what the will is in the human generations? Many different tips of rays, which were like sparks in creatures, to form the will in them, but without detaching these sparks from the ray unleashed by the center of the sun of the supreme volition. So, all human generations turn around this sun, because each creature contains the tip of one ray of this eternal sun of my will. Now, what is not the affront for this sun, to see the circumference of these rays, whose tips formed the will of each creature, converted, transmuted into darkness, into human nature, denying the light, the dominion and the life of that sun which gave its will with so much love, so that its will and those of creatures might be one, and so it might be able to form divine life in them? Can there be a stronger, more stable and inseparable bond than the one between the center of the sun and its rays? Light is indivisible, and if it could be separated, the detached part would go wandering and would end up turning into darkness. So, there is such union of identification between the divine will and the human, as to be comparable to the union that exists between the sun and the solar ray, between heat and light. Would it not be a right of the sun to dominate its rays and to receive their subjection so as to form its kingdom of light over its very solar circumference? So it is for my will. When the creature withdraws from it, it remains as though without kingdom, without dominion, without subjects. It feels itself being robbed of that which is its own. Each act which does not depend upon its volition is a tearing, a theft made against its light, and in seeing itself being robbed of its light, converted into darkness, it agonizes more than a mother who sees the fruit of her womb being snatched away from her, not to give him life, but to kill him. So, the losses that my will suffers when the creature is not united to its center and does not live of the volition of its light, are divine losses, and of infinite value. The evils for creatures, the ugliness they acquire, are incalculable and indescribable. My will remains without kingdom in the creatures, and they remain stripped, without inheritance, with no right to any good whatsoever. Therefore, there is nothing more important, nothing greater, which will establish the balance, the order, the harmony, the likeness between creator and creature, than my will. This is why I want to make known what the divine will, and the human will are, so that we may reconcile, and my will may acquire its kingdom, and creatures may be given back all the goods they lost.